In the ancient world, a verbal promise lacked teeth. To be legally binding, a pact required a physical, life-or-death guarantee. Abram is currently navigating this vulnerability. Having just won a major military victory, he has rejected the vast spoils of war from the king of Sodom to ensure his survival depends on God alone. He is wealthy in potential, but exposed in reality. In this state of unease, Yahweh appears in a vision, offering a dual shield. "Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great." Abram responds with a practical objection. While Yahweh has promised to make him a great nation, his tent remains empty. He is aging and he is childless. He references the legal custom of his time. Since he has no offspring, ancient law dictates that his household servant, Eliezer of Damascus, is currently his sole legal heir. Divine promises often collide with the contradictory evidence of the physical world. For Abram, the spoken word requires a tangible, legal anchor to overcome his doubt. Yahweh immediately dismisses the servant heir, declaring that Abram's inheritance will come through a biological son born from his own body. To demonstrate the scale of this promise, Yahweh leads Abram outside. He commands the patriarch to count the stars, an impossible task that serves as the new metric for Abram's future descendants. Abram believes the statement, and Genesis 15:6 records that Yahweh credits this belief to him as righteousness. This status is granted while Abram is simply standing under the night sky. Righteousness is attributed to him through faith before a single animal is slaughtered or any formal covenant ritual begins. After securing the promise of an heir, Yahweh shifts the focus to the land, formally pledging to give Abram the territory of Canaan as a permanent possession. Seeking finality, Abram asks for a sign of possession. This request triggers the commencement of the most violent treaty ritual in the ancient Near East. The response to Abram's doubt lies in ancient law. The Hebrew idiom for a treaty is karat barit, literally to cut a covenant. The verb karat denotes severing flesh. The language itself preserves the memory of the ritual required to make a contract binding. In our context, a covenant can feel like a sanitized modern agreement. In antiquity, it was a visceral, blood-soaked reality. It functioned as a self-maledictory oath. By performing the ritual, the participants were physically calling down a death curse upon themselves if they failed to uphold the terms. Regional treaties from Saphir and Alalak confirmed this was standard diplomatic practice. Vassals and kings would sever animals to provide a graphic visual representation of the penalty for perjury. Yahweh is intentionally condescending to this violent human custom, using the legal language of the 2nd millennium BCE to provide Abram with absolute certainty. Yahweh commands a specific inventory, a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a turtle dove and a young pigeon. Abram executes the preparation by splitting each mammal down the middle and arranging the halves opposite one another, creating a central corridor of blood. The birds are excluded from the severing, leaving them whole at the edges of this sacrificial architecture. As the sun begins to set, the scent of the carcasses attract scavenging birds of prey. Abram stays with the pieces, acting as a guard. He drives them off to preserve the integrity of the legal theater until the ritual completes. The physical preparation is finished. A literal pathway of death now stands ready for the participants to walk through and sign the agreement with their feet. But as the ritual reaches its climax, Abram is incapacitated. He falls into a tardema, a divinely induced deep sleep that removes his ability to act. A thick, terrifying darkness descends. This is the weight of divine holiness, a proximity so intense it produces deep dread in the passive observer. From within this darkness, Yahweh delivers a prophecy plotting out the next 4 centuries. Abram's descendants will be enslaved and oppressed in a foreign land before God judges that nation and leads them out. The stakes of this specific ritual are further clarified by historical precedent found later in the book of Jeremiah. In Jeremiah 34, the leaders of Judah walked between the parts of a severed calf to seal a vow. When they violated that covenant, Yahweh declared they would suffer the same fate as the animal, death and dismemberment. To walk between these pieces was to sign a bond in blood. It was a guarantee that death was the only alternative to fulfillment. In the absolute darkness, 2 symbols of the divine presence, a smoking furnace and a flaming torch, suddenly appear, piercing the dark. Convention required both parties to walk the path together. But here, Abram remains asleep. The divine presence enters the corridor of blood completely alone. By passing through the pieces alone, the Creator is assuming the entire burden of the covenant. He is binding himself to the promise, while bypassing any requirement for Abram to walk the path. Yahweh is making a non-verbal, physical vow. If this promise fails, let me be torn apart and destroyed. In a typical suzerain vassal treaty, the inferior party always took the risk. Here, the supreme king assumes the curse on behalf of the vassal. The survival of the promise now rests entirely on Yahweh's immortal character. The covenant is secure because it no longer depends on Abram's ability to remain faithful. This unilateral oath sets a trajectory that runs through the rest of the biblical narrative, tracing the debt created by human failure. The supernatural, dreadful darkness that fell over Abram in Genesis 15 finds its physical parallel in the darkness that eventually falls over Calvary. It is at Calvary that the brutal, self-maledictory curse, sworn centuries earlier in the blood path, is finally absorbed. The dismemberment and the poured-out blood, represented by the ancient animals, were fulfilled in the physical destruction of the Messiah. He took the penalty of the broken covenant upon himself. Abram's assurance was final because it did not rest on his own strength. It rested on the certainty that Yahweh would pay the ultimate price to keep his own word.